All right, Talia, I might jump on in if that sounds good.
Go for it.
Perfect. Well, welcome back, everyone. Welcome to week 3. Excited to have everyone back into the session. It's good to see some good numbers turning up. Hopefully that means we're doing something right and you guys are getting a lot of value out of the sessions in the past couple of weeks. I think this one's going to be particularly exciting because we're going to take a different tact. We're going to go a bit more sort of technical and get down into the weeds, I suppose, of understanding how to develop on Shopify. So a bit more of a sexy topic, I'd like to say. But look, might be a good session if there's still time and you're around some of the devs in your teams to bring them along to the session. Feel free to call them and get them to join in. If they're working on Shopify day to day, this could be a useful session for them to listen in on. If they can't make it though, also a good opportunity to get a hold of the recording and then pass it on to the rest of the team. With that though, like each week, I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Bedigal people of the Aurora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm presenting on today. Pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And also to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who are on this call today. I pay my respects to your elders past, present and emerging.
Thanks, Andrew. I live near Mongafau. I live near Waitemata Harbour, and today I acknowledge the ancestors of this land. My name is Talia. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Talia. Cool. So today's session, we actually got 2 of our technical managers at Shopify to come in and present to us on developing on Shopify. Now, we had a little bit of a late glitch in that both of them, funnily enough, had a conflict of timings and weren't actually able to make today's session, but I was able to convince them last night to record the session. So we'll still get the content, which is great news. And we actually, which is really exciting, got one of our local solutions engineers, Kyle, who's going to join us for the Q&A and to answer a lot of the questions. So Kyle, maybe do you want to just jump in and give a quick introduction so everyone can meet you too?
Of course. Cheers, Andrew. Yeah, g'day everyone. So my name's Kyle Herzog. I'm a solutions engineer with the Plus team over here I'm based out of Melbourne, but of course I deal with all merchants across APAC. Again, my role is really specifically to exactly that, just really doing sort of technical scoping sort of during the initial process of sort of moving on to Plus or onto Shopify platform specifically. So yeah, happy to help out today if I can answer any questions.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kyle. Really appreciate it. And as you can hear in the spirit of our ANZ sessions, Kyle's obviously originating from New Zealand, now in Australia. So a perfect person to have on the call. Look, with that, I think it's time to get into the content. So the way we're going to do today's session, plan of attack, is we're going to have Liam doing a session on theming, and then we're going to have time for Q&A straight after that. So you can ask those questions specifically about theming on Shopify. And then we'll play the session from Roman, who's going to be talking about apps. And then once again, we'll have time at the end to do another Q&A session. So think of those questions. Once again, we've got the chat on the side, which we can answer as we go along, or obviously at least have them prepped for when it's question time. So I think on that, unless someone's got any questions, queries, comments, you want to jump in before we kick in? Otherwise, we'll jump on in. Anything else from anyone? Brilliant. Talia, let's kick it off.
Oh, let's do it. We've got quite a lot to get through, so I will share my screen. Hopefully you can all hear and see, but let me know if not.
Hi there, my name is Liam Griffin, and I'm a developer community manager here at Shopify. Over the past 5 years, I've been creating technical content and team tutorials for developers on our Shopify Partners blog, as well as other resources. And over the next 15 minutes, I'd like to share some of the insights that I've learned during this time with you to help you work with themes and get you up running as quickly as possible when working on themes with your clients. So first off, we'll be taking a look at how themes fit into the merchant experience on Shopify, what considerations you should keep in mind when your clients are looking to add themes. Then we'll look at some of the different opportunities that exist for partners when it comes to enhancing themes for clients. Next, we'll look at some techniques for getting the most out of your Shopify templates and what workflows might suit your development team. And then finally, I'll share some resources and links for further learning. So let's dive into how Shopify themes work. So one of the easiest ways I think about Shopify themes is that they control the appearance of a client's or merchant's online store. A Shopify theme is the skin that's on top of a store and doesn't really affect the data that merchants add, such as product images or product descriptions or blog content or settings such as shipping rates or payment configuration. So if you've worked on other platforms before, such as WordPress, this concept of a templating system might be familiar to you. And I think one of the huge advantages of Shopify is how flexible and customizable storefronts can be. There's really a huge opportunity for partners to create and design themes which are specific to a particular type of purchase or a distinct type of customer. This quote from Michel of Maestro in France especially resonates with me. I think it acknowledges the various requirements, including performance, UX, and accessibility, that designers need to be mindful of when developing websites and how that challenge can be exhilarating. So just to give you an example of some of the options that can be implemented into Shopify stores, here's an example of a store, Karpov.Paris, that was designed by a partner agency. You can see very creative scrolling animation taking place here. We have elements moving around the page, really nice uses of space. Symmetry is sometimes broken up, so you have images in different areas. You can get very creative with placement. And you can see as well, those images are really nice and large, and they give the buyer a really good view into how that product will look and feel. And I think all of these different things.
We'll just work out this small muting for a moment. I can see Talia's onto it already.
So you can make changes to unpublished themes,
Okay.
and you can share that with your clients when you're making changes. We also have an online store editor where you can customize the appearance of the theme. This is without going into code or anything. This is just where you'll be, making changes to pre-existing settings, where you can add sections and different elements, maybe slideshows to home pages. And you can add, adjust different settings like fonts and colors. You can navigate to different page types and make changes to how that, like, for example, product page looks. And this is also where you can adjust the layout and different elements too. So where do merchants get themes? Well, one option is from the Shopify theme store. This is where we have a range of Shopify build themes and third-party build themes. The Shopify themes are free, and the third-party themes are paid and developed by our community of theme developers. And you can filter here by industry. You can find themes which are more suited to maybe larger products or smaller, different sized inventories. And a lot of the themes that you see here as well, you can try them out. You can demo them, all of the themes, in your own store to see an authentic view of what this will look like. And you'll see as well which features are available. You can filter by different industries and verticals as well, which is very helpful. And also these themes, they use HTML and CSS, which is standard for displaying content on web pages. We also use Liquid, which is a templating system that is developed in-house at Shopify that builds that connection between template files. And we'll be looking a little bit more at Liquid too. So just to give a little bit of background around Liquid, this is written based on Ruby, developed in-house at Shopify. And it's really the backbone of all the Shopify themes. This is what we use to load dynamic content on the pages of online stores. A very super simple example of this would be the product.title that you can see here. When that's added to a product template file, it's going to output the name of that product on all of the product pages. We also have very extensive developer documentations on shopify.dev, and that covers how to work with Liquid, and it highlights some of the most common customization So if you're making code edits to your theme store, you'll be checking out shopify.dev. We also have a cheat sheet for Liquid, which I will share at the end of the presentation as well. So let's look at some of the times when you might be working on themes for your clients. One of the most common theme-related tasks for developers and agencies is theme customization, where an existing theme is altered to meet a merchant's needs. Customizations range from minor tweaks, so this could be just customizing the storefront, setting up the theme within the editor that we showed, but it also could be more significant overhauls. Additionally, since Shopify is evolving all the time, we often release new features for themes. For example, displaying product media, so 3D images or videos on product pages, having accelerated checkout buttons, smart product recommendations. These native features may often need to be implemented onto existing themes, so that theme needs to be updated, and adding these features can be a service that you can provide to your clients. Also, adding a bespoke new feature to themes is a popular request. This could be a special requirement that your client has, such as adding a lookbook, an integration with a third-party service. And this is, again, is another area where you can add value to a project. So here's another example of a Shopify store. This one is called Dumb Good, also developed by a partner agency, and there's a lot of interesting elements on this page. Even though it's quite minimal, there's some nice integrations happening here with the accelerated checkout with Google Pay, and you can also find opportunities to help your clients if they are looking to add more branding to their theme. If you're designing favicons or logos or headers and footers, you could be setting up theme settings, applying fonts. They might have a specific font. You might also be updating the theme to add a new feature. So you have this, you may also like product recommendations section. That's a natively supported feature, but your client might need to have that added specifically. And also having something like a recently viewed section that will track products that buyers have been looking at. This could be a custom functionality that you need to add, especially for your client. Other areas where you can work on themes could include designing standalone landing pages for promotional activities that could be, part of the theme, but have its own unique URL. You could improve the speed of page loading times. Even minor reductions in loading times are proven to boost conversions. And you can even build bespoke themes from scratch. Some clients may request a highly personalized, unique theme that you can craft for them. So just a quick example of what a landing page could look like. This is from an example I used when I was writing a blog post on landing pages. And you can customize product or collection pages. You can remove, use conditions to remove the headers and footers. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of resources on how you can achieve this. Also, we recently launched a speed score that will analyze a merchant store and give them an indication of how fast their store is compared to similar stores on Shopify. There's a lot of ways that you can improve this score, such as removing code that's not being used, optimizing different scripts so that the theme will run faster, maybe disabling some app features that your clients are not using. And again, this is something that you can help clients out with. As I mentioned, developers sometimes build themes from scratch completely. We have some sort of building blocks and starter themes that come with very minimal code and very little styling, so that you can just get like a head start on building a theme from scratch. And this is often commissioned by single merchants with very specific requirements. I also want to mention some limitations as well to be aware of. Firstly, for merchants that are not on Shopify Plus, the secure checkout pages are not hosted on the theme. So when a buyer enters that checkout flow after leaving the cart page, which is part of the theme, they're redirected to a secure checkout. One workaround for including more conversion tracking is to include that on the order status page, which is the page that the buyer lands on once a purchase is made. Another limitation is around the URL structure. So pages on Shopify follow a very specific pattern for canonical URLs. For example, it will always include the word product if it's a product page, blog if it's a blog post, etc. And these also are translated for non-English merchants. But removing the type of page from the URL is not possible without some very crafty JavaScript work. And finally, just want to mention around a parent-child relationship that our themes don't have. This is something that exists on platforms like WordPress, where you're able to make automatic updates and have a version control system within the platform. One workaround for that is to just make sure that you're always duplicating themes when you're making changes, and you can set up a version control system that's independent of a Shopify store if you are looking for that kind of workflow on your themes. So let's take a look at now how you can edit themes yourself. So in addition to the online store editor, that customizer that I showed you, it's also possible to edit the theme files themselves within the Shopify admin. So if you go to Actions and Edit Code, you'll be able to access all of the different files that make up a theme right in the Shopify admin itself in this editor that you can see here. So you can see all of my theme directories. This is where all of the different files and templates exist that will make up my theme. I can go onto my product.liquid file and make some changes. I can add in any HTML or CSS here. So I'm just doing a very simple test. I'm going to add in a little bit of liquid code using the template object. And when this is rendered on a product page, we should see the type of product page that it is being displayed. So once I reload the page after making this change, I then see hello, and this is a product page. So you can see here a very, very simple example of how Liquid works to output use variables. Also, you can make changes to the styling. So we have a very, very simple edit here of adjusting the color. And then once again, when I load this on the product page, I just need to reload it, and I can see that my text is now coming up red. So this is just like a very simple example of how you can make very basic changes to themes using this editor. So you can also use a different development tool that we have released called ThemeKit, that if your developers have their own workflow, they will be able to edit themes locally on their computers. So once ThemeKit is installed, you can run Theme Watch from terminal, from a command line. And then when you make any changes to these theme files, which are installed on your computer, you are able to see those changes being pushed up to the live store. So essentially, this allows you to use your own tooling. It allows you to download themes if you're working on your client's themes, and then make those changes. So I've just very simply added some text to test it out, and when I reload, I can see that appearing. So what are the benefits of this approach? Well, it means that development teams can use software that they're familiar with. It also means additional tools can be built on top of this for version control if you have specific deploy pipelines. And it's really just a more reliable process for larger development projects. And there's a new version of ThemeKit available now with faster performance, so you should definitely check that out. So finally, I just wanted to share some resources and examples which are available to you. And I'm going to go through each one of these resources individually just to give you a better view into how they could be useful for you. So first off, we're going to look at Shopify.dev, our developer documentation that I mentioned, where you're able to learn a little bit more on Shopify theming. You can see there's a Liquid reference, and it shows you how to get started with things like Liquid, which can be very helpful if this is new to you. Even also on our regular help docs on help.shopify.com, and we have a lot of information on themes, how to choose the best theme for your client. Even though it's aimed at merchants, it can still be very useful for you for just ramping up on some of these new concepts. We also have a cheat sheet for Liquid where you're able to find different elements related to Liquid, understand a little bit more on their purpose, and see an example of them. And it also links out to different help docs as well, so you can see exactly what each of these elements are doing. So this is a really good searchable resource. I have this open on a tab all the time. If you're working on themes, this is going to be really, really useful for you. We also have a Liquid code examples. So this is a library of a bunch of different components and elements that would be used in themes. It's organized by category, so you can quickly find some examples of elements that might be part of your theme. So for example, we can look at accessible pagination. We see a description and instructions on how to add this to a theme. We can see the code example here, and we can just simply copy this and then paste it into our theme if you like. But it can also be used even just as an educational tool to see what some of the different elements are made up of. How an announcement bar, for example, would look on a Shopify theme, see what settings can be added. So this is, again, very, very useful for developers who are starting off. We also have a web design and development blog. This is an article that was published today from one of our developer advocates, Thomas Kelly, all about speed on Shopify. So looking under the hood of how themes and Shopify work in regards to performance and site loading speeds. So also very, very useful to keep in touch with. And also I wanted to share some areas where you can find inspiration for your own designs as well. On the awards.com website, you can filter by Shopify, so you can see developers and agencies that have submitted their designs, and you can click into their stores and get a view into the Shopify store that a agency has worked on for inspirations. Can be really good. And there's also a site called commercecream.com, which curates the best of Shopify. So this is Shopify, fully Shopify specific, where you can see different stores. And also one that is just on my radar recently is reallygoodstores.com, where you can, again, filter by Shopify to see examples of some designs that people have been working on. So that's it from me. Thanks for your attention so far. I know there's a lot of information on themes, but I also want to tell you that I am available if you have any other additional questions. My email address is there, liam.griffin@shopify.com. I'm also on Twitter as well if you want to reach out to me there at liam@shopify. So thanks for your attention, and best of luck with your projects related to themes.
Great. Hopefully you're able to follow along there with Liam's theme presentation. We're going to take a quick break now, and if you've got any questions, then please post them in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself, and we can answer any questions related to theming. And sorry about losing audio partway through. we'll share that video after the session, as well as some of those links that were mentioned. Okay, I might kick off and send a question your way, Kyle. How can one ensure that a Shopify store is fast, particularly down these ways in Australia and New Zealand?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And I think a lot of the time when I sort of chat to merchants and obviously to partners too, in terms of just optimizing a site for speed, it's absolutely sort of, there's not really any one thing that's just going to sort of propel your site to be as fast as possible. It really is a strategy from the ground up. I mean, I suppose a good question to ask is that why do sites why aren't sites performant, or why do sites slow down on Shopify? And it's typically because if you've got merchants who are not optimizing their images, not lazy loading, not just using apps without really understanding what they're doing under the hood. A really good example of this that I come across quite often is apps that are doing a lot of excessive liquid looping, which are causing, of course, that page load to increase. Understanding what that is, and then kind of course, trimming that back, maybe coming up with a different solution to make that a little bit faster. I think that's the main thing. So typically when I talk to merchants that are saying, hey, like we want our site to be as performant and fast as possible, it's having that conversation with obviously with you guys, with the partners, to say, hey, like we'd like to build this from the ground up with a focus on being as fast as possible. And then thanks Mark. That's there's that little that theme inspector tool that we can actually do within the Chrome developer tools. You can sort of do liquid checking on that as well. But yeah, the key sort of thing is just there's definitely sort of strategies as far as that. It's building from the ground up, checking to make sure that if there are any apps that are kind of contributing to that load time, lazy loading your images, of course, don't load anything that you don't need to, using that source set for resolution as well, making sure that if you're only loading an image based on screen resolution, things like that. Especially with the addition of our online speed report tool as well, there's obviously additional insights that merchants and yourself can kind of take to really push that speed to the best it can be on Shopify itself.
Great. It's a great answer. Thank you. Any questions from anyone?
I had a question around the new Speed Score tool. We've noticed that how closely is it related to something like Page Speed Insights from Google, where a lot of the time what you're talking about with third-party code, things like Facebook Pixel and some chat apps and things like that, they can really pull down the score on Page Speed Insights. Is that something that happens with the Shopify Page Speed Score as well? And how can we get around those situations, especially with things like Facebook Pixel, where it's it's a roadblock that you can't get past?
Yep, that's a good question. I think I think it's a good thing to, as far as that sort of speed report was concerned, the reason that we sort of did build that was to kind of bring attention to things like that almost are a bit of a roadblock, right? If there is a specific app that someone is using that is causing a significant amount of speed or contributing to that page load time, then how can we kind of work around that or work within that? But yeah, you're correct in terms of the fact that we do use those same sort of page speed insights. But yeah, it's really, I think, it's holding that sort of thing accountable. Like, I think we're not trying to make us look like that anything's going to be faster from that end. Like, that is a problem, and it's like, how can we work around that? Especially if that's something that is consistent from your end, it's a good conversation or good feedback to send to us internally, so we can say, hey, we've seen this consistently across all of our online stores, so how can we internally have some sort of change with that? But yeah, look, I understand it's a rock and a hard place situation, but I think it's meant to hold everyone in the ecosystem accountable to say, hey, like, this is contributing to page speed. What can we do about it collectively?
Thanks, Carl, and thanks for your question, Mark. Are there any other questions before we move on to the next presentation?
I had a question about ThemeKit and ThemeWatch. Do those two have to be used hand in hand, or can you use your own IDE and will ThemeWatch still work?
So you can use your own IDE. My understanding is they're not required to be used in conjunction with each other, but you can do it, put it that way. Like it's the it's my understanding that they're not like, you don't have to have them in tandem, but yeah, you can use your own IDE as well. But
okay, thanks.
I'll check that, absolutely, no worries though.
Cheers.
Great. Well, if there aren't any more questions for now, we'll move on to the next presentation on apps. But as Andrew has said in the chat, if you've got more questions on themes, feel free to pop them in the chat, and hopefully we'll have time to get to them at the end. But with that, I'm going to share my screen again. And we'll move on to the next presentation.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session. My name is Roman Senner from the German partner team. I'm a tech partner manager, and I'd like to talk to you about how to customize Shopify with apps. Well, you might have seen that you can change the way in which Shopify looks and behaves, how to change the UX through changing of the theme. But today I'd like to really talk about how to dive a bit deeper and work with the Shopify data and customize an app and build an app for a specific business case. So first of all, I'd like to go into talking about what's a Shopify app anyway. So what do we understand as an app? How can you build an app? The second thing is how you can actually use Shopify's APIs in your app in order to communicate with the platform. Then I'd like to talk about which different sorts of apps there are and which sort of app you would probably use for a specific purpose. And then I go a little bit into developer tools and tutorials. And at the end, I'll just share some resources with you that I think are going to be quite helpful for your work. So what's a Shopify app? Well, you might have come across the App Store. This is like where most of our public apps sit. So you've just probably seen this already, but just as a recap, so this is where we have more than 4,600 apps already. And the good thing is that for merchants, it's quite easy to install them. So the merchants don't need to code anything, or they don't need any fancy integration. They don't need to do specific stuff. It's basically one-click install, like they would install an app on, say, an iPhone or an Android phone. So that's how it works. There are certain models around there. So there are free apps and it's a freemium model, but you can also, purchase apps, because they obviously add value for your business case. So it's worthwhile investigating which apps that could be. And then it's also interesting to note that having an app is quite normal in the Shopify world. So typically, well, in this case, on average, a Shopify merchant has about 6 apps installed. So it's perfectly normal to have your Shopify installation and then a number of apps specific for your business case. Let's look a bit deeper into this. So as you might know, Shopify is a software as a service platform, which means that you cannot install code on the server that the system is running on, right? So if you're used to, say, something like probably WordPress as a CMS, as a blogging software, you might know that this can be installed on the server, and you can install WordPress plugins which go into the system and work on the same server. Well, in this case, it's not possible. So what we offer instead is a mechanism, basically, where you can have and run your own application around the platform as a separate service. And what happens then is those services, those apps that you're writing, that you're providing, exchange information through APIs. So this is how it basically works. So the setup is you've got the Shopify platform in the middle, and then your apps are basically around this core platform, exchanging data through APIs. And this is true for apps which you will install via the App Store, but also for custom apps and private apps. I'm going to come to those a bit later. So let's talk about APIs. So APIs, you might have heard the term, it's short for Application Programming Interface. And essentially this is what it is. It allows data to travel from one application to another. And in the Shopify world, this is the way in which you communicate or your apps communicate with the Shopify platform. We've got two different APIs, and I just realized it's quite funny with my head like this. Anyway, so we've got the admin API on the one hand, which basically serves to access data in your backend, like say all the data, customer data. So those are accessible via admin, the admin API. And there's the storefront API, which, as the name already suggests, is there for you to access stuff like product data, so that you can really, focus on the data which the customers are seeing in the front end and which you can manipulate. And for the admin API, you can use either REST or GraphQL, and in the storefront, it's only GraphQL. So this is basically how we set this up at Shopify, and we've got the whole big documentation on our website to illustrate this. And in case you're wondering how this looks like, well, this is a REST example. This is actually a JSON file. A JSON is a structured data file that you can send to a server, and then you receive an answer back. So, for example, in this case, what you'd like to do is you would like to create a new product via the, in this case, the admin API via REST. So you send this chunk of information to our API, obviously after authentication, all these things. And then this product is actually stored in the system. So you don't actually need the admin and enter the product there, but you just do this automatically. Or in this case, your app could do this automatically. And this is where apps come in. This is how you can alter the data and add extra bits of functionality to your app. So there are different sorts of apps, and depending on what you're planning to do, depending on your circumstances, different apps or different types of apps might be the best for your project. The first two we call public and custom apps. Basically, what they do is create a wrapper of authentication which allows you to add functionality to them. So you would choose a custom app if you just had a project, one merchant that you'd like to serve, and you have a very a custom functionality for this specific customer. So you'd go, in this case, to the partner dashboard. This is what you see here. So the partner dashboard, you click on create apps, choose the custom app, and then you can set some basic data, and then you get the API keys that you need for the app. The second variant here is the public app. This is technically speaking very similar to the custom app. The only difference is that those apps are meant to go in the App Store. So once you decide for a public app, you have to also provide stuff like app listings and all those kinds of information, so that your app can actually be shown on the App Store. And this goes through a review process, and if this is successful, then you have this app on the App Store. I'll get to this process a little bit later on. The requirement for those public apps are also laid out on the website. So essentially, we'd like you, or we don't like you to create apps which add no value to the customer. So they need to have a minimum bit of functionality. They need to work with the Shopify APIs. We don't support so many payment providers. So if you want to introduce your own payment service, please check back with us, because this is something that we don't typically do so often. And there are a bunch of other things that you can see on the website, which are basically just for you, a guideline for you to know what can actually be on the App Store. And I put the link here for you to check this out. Yeah, and once your app is on the App Store and is one of the 4,600 even more apps on the App Store, then merchants can just find those apps, find your app, and install the app via just one click. And they have the app there, and they can just start using it. So in this example, you see the order printer app, which is also a Shopify built app. And this app allows you to create invoices out of your orders. And the nice thing about this example is that it's A, very easy to install, as I said, and B, it's already embedded. So it's using the same look and feel as the main Shopify admin, but it's an external app. The private app is a little bit different. It's not created out of the partner dashboard. It's created from the merchant's admin interface. So it's a bit, let's say, easier to do this. And also the authentication is not quite as complex, I'd say, as in case of the custom public apps. So if you want to, maybe try something out for your customer, and you're quite aware of what you're doing, a private app might be a good first step to get to know Shopify and get to know the Shopify logic and play around with the APIs. And also, a private app is typically used for ThemeKit, which is our tool helping you to work with themes on your local machine. So in summary, this is the most important parts are in this table. So if you have custom apps and public apps are both installed via the partner dashboard, and while the custom app is restricted to one specific store, public apps, and this makes perfect sense, are unlimited. So all Shopify merchants all around the world can install your app, and this is the purpose of the app. The custom apps, obviously, they don't have an app store listing, while the public apps have listings. There's a review process for public apps, and you can also, as I said, embed the app in your admin, which makes it actually look like a native Shopify functionality. On the other hand, the private apps are a bit different, so they are being created in the store admin. They're also restricted to one store, but there's no root process. You cannot embed the app in your admin, and the authentication is no auth by, it's HTTP, which is a bit less complex. So let's talk about tools and tutorials. So I'd like to recommend a couple of things. So the first thing is the app CLI, which we have released, or we released a few days ago, actually. You can find on GitHub, and it's actually a tool where you can use your command line to set up the basic of an app. So it does some heavy lifting for you. It takes away a bit of your workload, so you can make sure to use the billing API. For example, if you're using a billing a public app, and you need to use the billing API, or it lets you listen to webhooks, these kinds of things. So check out the CLI. It makes life easier for you. The second thing is the theme kit, and I think you've heard this before. It's still worthwhile listing here. So the theme kit is also a command line tool which lets you edit your liquid code, your template code on your local machine, and then monitors your code for changes, and then uploads the changes to the Shopify service. And the last thing I'd like to mention is the Polaris framework. It's a framework, and it has styles and content elements, and basically helps you to make your app look like real Shopify user interfaces. So you don't have to worry about how your buttons look like and how your states look like. You can just use Polaris, and it has all the styles and all the elements that are required to make your app look nice. And finally, I'd really recommend, if you really want to, experience this firsthand. So if you really would like to run through this whole process of, setting up an app and, testing it with your platform with Shopify, then I'd highly recommend going through this. So it's an example where you build an app based on Node and React, and you can see all the different steps which are involved. So how to set up your own local environment, and how to build the app, and that works with Shopify and the APIs. So this was almost it. I'd like to point you to a couple of sources. So our main point of entry for everything which has to do with development is shopify.dev. So this is where you find the documentation, the tutorials, and basically all you need to get going. There's a large community discussing all things Shopify. So be it development themes or theme related or user related, this is where you can find in the communities. And also, if you're a partner, we'd like to invite you to our partner Slack channel. And it's actually quite active. People talk about all things that, that are important for app development and other topics. So make sure to check this out. Other than that, I'd like to end this and hope you find this useful. If you have any questions, just let me know. I'm here on Slack or I'm here on email and just.
Okay, cut out a little bit at the end there. But hope you found that helpful. Thank you, Roman. Very impressed with his setup. I don't know if any of you noticed that. Great. Okay, well, let's jump into Q&A then. Have any questions come through?
See, there was a question from Chris just on the REST API and features going forward. And so, yeah, preferentially because we're sort of looking at it from a GraphQL first standpoint, typically new features are going to be sort of built on GraphQL rather than putting them into REST as well. So especially things like the new product media sets, the auto editing functionality, for example, is all going to be built on GraphQL. It's a good little incentive to kind of start moving across to GraphQL to get access to the new features.
Great, thanks, Kyle. Any questions from the audience? I'll jump in and ask you one, Kyle. Do you have any examples of custom integrations or apps that you've seen that have maybe solved a unique problem or done something creative that you could share?
Heaps. So my background sort of prior to Shopify was involved more in sort of the inventory and shipping space. So I get really excited when I see cool like apps and functions using sort of click and collect functionality, and then sort of shipping stuff outside of that. But one of the common things that I do see quite a lot when I talk to merchants is the want to be able to surface product availability at a product page based on whether the customer is actually purchasing from or around. So if I've got a store that's close to me, being able to choose and select a store based on my location, and then based on that selection at the product page, being able to show me, hey, this is actually available at the store that you've selected or available at other stores nearby. Just being able to kind of give those different avenues from an omni-channel standpoint, I think are really awesome. And I preferably for myself as well, I like to be able to go, like if I get the option to click and collect close by a store, it's done, rather than waiting for a delivery window. So it's things like that I sort of see really interesting implementations of how you can utilize custom apps.
Nice.
I'll just jump in there. It's a really good point that you make, Carl, because I think as Talia pointed out last week, one of the big shifts we've seen at Shopify over the COVID period has been this change in consumer landscape and consumer behavior to sort of shop locally and to really demand that local opportunity. So apps like that obviously play into that and allow the consumer to know what's available and to be able to purchase from their local branch or their local store, whatever it might be. So yeah, really good point you make there. Any other questions, particularly sort of specific challenges you may have seen from your own merchants when they're looking for a particular app that just isn't available on the Shopify ecosystem? Something that you've come across?
I've got a question about apps. I was just having a look at that list of things apps aren't allowed to do or be that was mentioned in the presentation. It says number 4 there says apps that make little or no use of Shopify's API are probably not allowed. I was thinking of making a really simple app that would do a kind of a pop-up for a join our newsletter type thing. That would just that would link to, I don't know, MailChimp or whatever. But I don't think that it would integrate in any way with any of Shopify's APIs. So would that not be allowed?
Because so effectively, I can imagine it would do, because in order to sign up for a newsletter, you've got to do an opt-in of some sort, right? So
Right.
in that particular case, you might be interfacing with the customer object to then have an opt-in, have an opt-in set so that they can be sent that content. So that I can see that potentially as being a way, but I'm just trying to think of, because I know, for example, that if you land on a site, you're not going to be logged in. There's not going to be a specific object set, but at least I can at least sort of see that from when the customer object is going to be created, you can then at least have an opt-in from that. So there's that side, and again, I think in a situation like that, like if it is specific, then it's probably like a subject for review thing. I guarantee you there'd be a grey area as far as that type of thing is concerned.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Thanks.
Question from Michael. One issue I've had when taking over existing Shopify sites from other devs is the theme being full of junk from old apps that have been installed and uninstalled, and the JavaScript embeds being left throughout the theme files, etc. Is there any plan to make something that can remove these sorts of things?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and it's such a common issue, and especially even for myself when people are moving into Plus as well. It's like, hey, like one of the common questions that I always get is that will Plus make my site faster? Which the answer just directly or absolutely in itself is no. How we're looking to address this is what you've all been waiting for in the form of Sections Everywhere, which is coming soon. A part of that is actually going to be the app extensions piece, which is going to allow app sections and also app snippets. So effectively, it means then that when it's just going to be a much cleaner way for these app snippet code pieces to be removed when a merchant uninstalls an app. So rather than it just sort of laying there as latent code, and then it takes someone like yourself to go through and do a speed analysis and find out that they're still calling some JavaScript library that's completely irrelevant. These app snippets, or the way that this is going to change foundationally is going to require that when the customer uninstalls it, it means then that it's going to just not call that snippet anymore and make it a lot easier for you guys. You don't have to sift through someone else's code and remove all of the junk code.
Can you quickly expand on what Sections Everywhere is?
Sure. So Sections Everywhere is, I suppose I'll just preface it. The online store editor that we have currently, on the homepage, you have the ability to create and move sections around. So these are great tools for marketers, for people who don't have obviously that direct coding experience, to be able to go in and change content as easy as possible. And so at the moment, that's only available on the homepage. So it's of course, so the first request we got is like, how come this isn't available for all sections, for your pages, for blocks, for products, all that sort of thing as well. So it's the ability to have that section availability for you to be able to code a theme end to end with all of these, all this customization for your merchants. Of course, that then will include the fact that you can then do this on an app level as well. So if I add customer reviews to a product page, I can then choose exactly where that section is going to appear. It's just going to give a lot of flexibility and a lot more control to the merchants directly, rather than having to come in and sort of, I suppose, have to ask for every little thing to be changed.
Thanks, Kyle. I saw Mark has asked if there's any update on date for launch. I believe we don't have any update on that, other than in the last partner town hall, our CTO, JML, was just speaking about how it was much bigger endeavor than we thought. So yeah, I don't think it will be this year as planned. Okay, a question from Shane. Is there any way of customizing third-party apps by other developers through code outside of the options they make available, e.g. like WordPress hooks, actions, and filters?
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, my understanding would be no, because depending on the way that if the app is hosted by that specific developer, then it's going to be locked down to their own control. There's not going to be, unless they provide like an API or elements that you can then interface with that app directly to make customizations, there's not going to be any way you can directly sort of change the source of that. But let me know if I understood the question correctly.
Got a couple of minutes left. Are there any other questions feel free to jump on.
I might jump in. Just following up from Mark's point originally around the process of sort of putting an app into the App Store, building your own app. Do you want to just quickly talk to that process and how it is an iterative process where you'll get feedback when you put an application in for an app to be built and be accepted from the Shopify sort of admins?
So, well, look, this is definitely not my sort of area of expertise, but my understanding is it's really just specific to those sort of requirements. Like I think if I just think about the different types of apps that you're wanting to produce, right? If it's something that you can see as a value prop for all or most merchants, then this is absolutely something that you might want to release publicly and kind of follow through those requirements, go through the actual the process of getting it approved, and then of course selling it on the App Store. If it's a custom or private app piece, then of course it's going to be specific to one or a single merchant. It means you get around those having those listed on the app stores, but it means then you can be a little bit specific to the merchant's business case and what they want to achieve with that specific app. So I think it's just the different sort of types really. It's, do I have a one-to-many app approach, or do I have a very specific need for a specific merchant?
Yeah, good point. And Roman also mentioned that, right? Because he was sort of saying that process, you first start out with that individual private app and you can test it out and see if it's got value. And we've seen from a lot of our partners, that's a really good avenue to sort of realize that a product or an app actually is serving a really good purpose. And you might be able to scale that and actually then launch it onto the App Store and find new revenue streams that are recurring and sort of alternate to your traditional agency model. So it's a good way that we've seen a lot of our partners sort of approach apps and really find successful revenue long term.
Totally. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question from Chris. Any plans to add price lists for multi-currency?
Probably one of our most requested features as soon as multi-currency launched. I can't say anything absolutely, but yeah, look, it definitely, as far as the fact that after that acquisition of Handshake, of course, we do have an internal B2B strategy. Price lists has been probably one of the most requested things that I've discussed with my merchants, like ongoing ever since multi-currency launched. Because of course, the only alternative right now is to build an entirely separate Shopify store and then regionalize that for that specific price list. I can definitely say that feedback has been heard, but yeah, I can't give anything sort of absolute at this point.
Great, thanks, Kyle. Okay, we're on the hour now, so I think we'll wrap up there. If you do have any more questions or if anything pops up over the next couple of days, feel free to jump into the Slack channel and Andrew and I can jump on those questions for you. Make sure to check your email. We'll send a follow-up today or tomorrow with some of the links that were mentioned today, as well as some other great videos and resources that will be worth checking out and sharing with your team. Other than that, a massive thank you to all of you for tuning in today. Hope you found that helpful. Again, we'll circulate the video and presentation so you can share those with your wider team. Thank you, Kyle, for joining us and answering those questions. We hope you have a good week. We've got a really great session coming up next week. In fact, Andrew, I might get you to give the rundown on what they can expect for next week.
Yeah, definitely. So next week we've got one of our longest serving partners, an agency called MindArc, which a lot of you may have heard of. Sean from MindArc is going to be joining us and really just talking about his journey on Shopify and specifically how he built his agency and evolved from being a Magento-based agency to now being focused on Shopify, how that's impacted his business, what they offer, and how they manage their sort of revenue structures and pricing structures. So hoping that will be really interesting for everyone to join in and wrap up the 4-week onboarding session.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Okay, well, we are over time, so thank you so much for joining and keep the feedback coming and have a great rest of the week. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Talia. Just one more thing before everyone does head off. Really encourage everyone to jump onto that Slack channel. Saw some great conversations happening between each of you and sort of setting up time to meet and sort of discuss things that are relevant. really encourage you guys to do that. I think that's a great opportunity. If you've got a query or you want to know how another agency is doing something, chuck it into that Slack channel, and I guarantee you someone will pick it up, and who knows what opportunities will emerge from that. So really use that, as Talia mentioned, and see what can come out of it. But great to see everyone. Have a great week.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.